Hey everyone, Mark Hayward here from the Absolute Business Mindset podcast and YouTube channel. Today we have a feature-length episode with Lisa Morton, who is the CEO and founder of Roland Dransfield, which is an integrated communications agency. We talk a wide variety of different things. We talk about an early degree in English and French. We talk about early roles that she was able to develop as a PR strategist and really be able to really bring on those skill sets that she was able to then set up her own agency. And we go really deep into culture, diversity, how it's so important to her, the values of the company. And she's got 15 values that she uses, and she says that she lives and breathes those values. They are so critical to her. So I hope you enjoy this story. I hope you enjoy her comments, her thoughts, her ideas that she has. She's a great guest. I really appreciated having Lisa on. If you are enjoying it, please do give it a thumbs up. Please do hit to subscribe and do hit the bell icon. Because just so you know when the next video is going to be released. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy the interview. This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. This podcast will interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and people in their careers. We will delve into their journey to success, key life milestones, and go deep into their area of expertise. Get ready to learn from others' successes and failures. Today we have Lisa Morton, who is the CEO and founder of Roland Dransfield, which is an integrated comms company. Hello, Lisa. How are you?
Hi, Mark. I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to come on today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. So we're going to the first question, the question I've introduced relatively recently. Podcast is called Absolute Business Mindset. What does business mindset mean to you?
Well, business mindset to me means that you get out of bed every day and that you can show up in whatever business you are involved with purpose and commitment, and that you go home at the end of that day feeling that you've achieved something and that you feel that that's the right place for you. And I think if you don't have that, it doesn't matter what environment you're working in, you're just not going to be able to get up every day and take those small steps that lead to business success.
Yeah, showing up is so important, isn't it? It's even if you're not necessarily good at your business or your business is not being successful, just turning up every day and making that 1% change every day could be massive, can't that?
Definitely.
Thank you, Lisa. So let's talk about your education. So you did a degree in English and French.
Yes, I did.
Why did you choose languages?
I always loved languages. Actually, I did Latin, and I did French, and I did German, and I did Spanish actually just as a hobby. So I loved languages, and I felt with English and French, I did want to continue. I think when I was younger, I always thought I wanted to be a translator. I wanted to travel from being a very young age. I thought that having fluency in a language would stand me in good stead. But then I found when I was at university, I did a combined honours of English and French. There was obviously a very strong literature thread through there, in addition to the language in both English and French. And I love books, and I love reading, and I love studying them. So for me, it was a really nice. The two kind of degrees kind of complemented each other.
Right.
And after university, I did actually go and work in France. I worked in Provence for 8 months. In marketing, actually. So again, I was able to use that my language then, and became fluent in French, but with what's the equivalent, I think, of in France as a Birmingham accent. Because when I went to Paris, nobody could understand a word I was saying.
Well, we can talk about Manchester, because Manchester is obviously very dear to your heart.
Yeah.
But so just on the French side, so you went out there for 8 months and worked there. Was that an exchange, or was that something you actually then found a job out there?
Yeah. So basically, after university, I ended up working in Manchester, and I had a job for a year, and I worked for a one-man band. At that time when I left university, there were literally no jobs, so I got a job that I could get, and I was earning £5,000 a year. And then I had an opportunity with a boyfriend at the time who'd got a job as a technical author with GEC Alstom. And I thought, I'm going out there too. So I my job and I went over to Provence without a job, much to my parents. Yeah, what are you doing about paying that overdraft off? And but I just went out there and I found a job in a local authority, in actual fact, in a village that I was is an industrial zone, and I just went in there and I was able to kind of got a PR job there. I realized after, and it was amazing. It did so much for my confidence. I was out of my comfort zone because nobody else spoke English really in the depths of that area. And but ultimately I knew that wasn't going to be a career move. So after, I think it was actually 9 months or so, I came back home and then I got a job in an agency in Manchester.
So what was the first job? Was the first job in Provence, or is there another
No,
one?
my first job after university, I had to go and work for my dad for a few months, and he had an engineering business, and that didn't work because we were too similar in personality. So that was a job to tide me over while I wrote probably 200 letters to agencies in longhand to try and get in and get through the door. And so finally I got a job. It was with a freelancer basically who was expanding his business, and I worked with him. And my first job as part of that agency was I handled all the PR for Boddington's Bitter. So I was in pubs and the brewery a lot. So I had a lot of friends because on Friday night I used to bring a load of beer home every week.
Oh, brilliant! Sounds the ideal job for me. I've never. I was talking to a guy that was who worked for big big brands in the alcohol industry, so spirits and things, and he was like, yeah, you just end up with freebies. Like people turn up to the office with a bottle of Bacardi or a bottle of whiskey or a bottle of like vodka, and they just like, oh, okay, yeah, you can have that. And then obviously they'd open it probably in the afternoon, Friday afternoon as well.
Exactly. I wasn't a bitter girl myself though, so it wasn't much use for me. But I had a lot of my friends used to come around on a Friday night for their supplies. Yeah.
Fantastic. The other role that I wanted to talk to you about before we talk about your current business was you were managing director in public relations at ICA Advertising and Marketing. So that was slightly different to everything else you've done. So what was the attraction within public relations? Because it's quite a broad, public relations, advertising, marketing is quite a broad business, although it's in the same area. It's a broad spectrum. How did you get the role? How did you develop in that role? What did you find rewarding from it?
Yeah, so with that, I had then moved to another agency, another small PR company, traditional PR company in Manchester, which was an owner-managed business, and so it was, somebody that I did learn a lot of. It was her own business. And then I was headhunted by an advertising agency that we did some work with, which we collaborated on a number of accounts on. And they were looking for a maternity cover for their PR director, which was the kind of their sister PR company. And I think I was about 25 then, 4 or 5. And I was looking to kind of move forward in my career, but I also felt that was a massive leap for me. So I remember being terrified when they actually offered me the job. I didn't sleep that night thinking, what on earth have I done here? I had utter imposter syndrome. But it was actually the making of me that, because I went into an agency that at the time was, say, turning over, I think it was about, well, at the time it was making a bit of a loss, and I managed to turn it around in a year. And the director didn't actually come back to the business. So I ran that PR company within that agency for a couple of, probably 3 years. Learned loads, it was a very male dominated business. So I learned to have some very thick skin. I think I was respected in there, but I was very much younger than the board of directors, who were all male. So it was an interesting time, but one in which I was able to kind of have that independence and make mistakes. They gave me enough arm's length management, and they stepped back so that I felt that I was in a safe place to kind of learn my craft. And at that time I realized then, it's all about relationships, and at that point, because I didn't have the I suppose the restraints of having to work for a small owner managed business, I was able to develop those myself freely, and that was, I would say, the foundation of my career.
Good. Okay, so let's move on to Roland Dransford. So you're founder and CEO. What started your interest in wanting to start your own business?
Well, I'd always wanted to have my own business. And so Roland Dransfield is actually named after my godfather. And the story there is that my dad used to be a mechanic when he was a young man, and when after he'd had myself and my brother. And Roland was an entrepreneur in Manchester who my dad used to service his cars. So Roland came and into regularly to bring his cars into my dad. Really liked my dad's service and the way that he dealt with Roland. And then he gave Roland a job. He gave my dad a job in his engineering business, and then they went on to run that very successfully. But when I was like 8 years old, Roland used to come to our house, and he always used to say to me, you need to have your own business when you grow up, Lisa. Don't work for anybody else. And he used to say that a job was stand for just over broke. So I always remember that. And then one day he came and he arrived on a Sunday at my mum's house and said, had a bucket and a sponge. And he said to me, okay, right, you're going into business today. You can go and wash neighbours' cars. And he said, and at the end of the day, you come back and you pay me for the bucket and the sponge. And if you can pay me back today, you're in profit. And if you can't, then you pay me back the rest of it next week. So at 8 years old, that work ethic and all the lessons that I got from that car washing round, again, they're the values that I've stuck to throughout my working life. And it taught me so much. Like, it taught me at 8, 9 years old that, for every no you get, you're closer to the yes. Don't be concerned about rejection. You've got to negotiate your price, give a fair service, you'll get rewarded. And it's all about, being nice to people, being respectful. And so even at 8, I was learning those business values. So when I set the business up, after I'd been at ICA, they were going through a trade sale, and I didn't really want to be part of that new organisation going forward. So I decided to go on my own. And I started Roland Dransfield without the internet, which my kids can't believe. But based on relationships again, and delivering good quality service and doing what you said you'll do, and acting with integrity, which I think at the time when I started the business off, it was still a very male-dominated, very traditional boys' club type industry, where PR was about long boozy lunches, black books, smoke and mirrors, and I wanted to modernise that even without the internet. But that's what I wanted to do, is to bring something that was fresher to the art of building connections and relationships, which PR is.
I want to talk about that whole aspect of women entrepreneurs, and I will come back to that from a previous conversation I've had. But just so everyone is on the same page, what is actually an integrated communication agency?
Yeah. So now, I mean, when I first got into PR, it was very much traditionally it's public relations. And that was really using the platforms. It's all about connections, influencing, engagement, but it was using the platforms of, really, in those days, you had hard, print media, broadcast media, you had events, you'd have direct lobbying, that kind of thing, newsletters. Over the years, I mean, obviously, I think it was 2008, 2009, when we had that big property crash, huge recession. At that point, I realized that those traditional platforms weren't going to be enough anymore. We had, global communications required digital connections, social media. So we modernized the business. I had no clue what I was doing. We were, after that recession, we were very, very, we were not cash rich at all. And it was a really difficult time. But we kind of spent our last dollar, I suppose, on going over to the States to understand what content marketing was all about, social media marketing. And on the back of that, you can change the profile of the skill set in the business. So at that point, it became integrated. So currently, we will offer the whole gamut of communications, which would cover traditional PR, so owned media, social media, obviously, earned media. We have audio strategy. So we produce podcasts and develop podcasts for people. We'll obviously do events. We do stakeholder engagement. So we now can literally offer everything under one roof, which I really think, in terms of modern communication now. You need to be able to do that. It's not one size fits all anymore.
Yeah, it sounds like it's changed a hell of a lot, and social media is a blessing and a curse, isn't it? And to be able to understand how to leverage social media is just so important in 2022. It's been important for what, 6, 7, 8 years now, so I can only see that becoming more and more important. But I want to touch on women and in women entrepreneurs. I was talking to someone, Karine Lambert, and we were talking about the role of women in corporate in the UK, and she was saying that what has developed over the last, but let's just say 10 years, is that women have been a lot more supportive with other women in corporate careers and entrepreneurs. There's a lot of women groups, friends of mine that are part of women's groups as well, where 10 years ago back, women were always competing with women to be one of the boys, be one of the lads. How is it, how from your experience, your personal experience, how has being a woman in a career and a woman as an entrepreneur changed over the period?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, when I started work at 21, attitudes towards women in the workplace were, from my experience, so different. I mean, there was I struggled quite a lot with people not taking me seriously, or a lot of sexism, latent sexism, overt sexism, sexual harassment as a young woman in those days, in a junior position in particular. And it was very much a boys' club, without a doubt. And I then went to work for another business which was run by a woman, and there was, you could sense, even if you were subconsciously, that there was a real competitiveness to, even by bringing women into your organization to work for you, there was competitiveness with your employees, that there was a fear that because there were few positions for a lot of women, or not many women ran businesses, there was an absolute fear of potential loss, or somebody take your position. I didn't feel that, because I think I felt that, and I'd always felt through university and growing up, that it's irrelevant if you're a male, or female, it's your determination. So I never felt there were any barriers as such at all in my career ever, other than from some women who might want to have your job off you. But I did feel that you had to watch your back in some situations. And when I set Roland Dransfield up as a young woman, I was dealing with men who are much older than me, who were clients, maybe particularly in a professional services organisation, that we did a lot of financial services and professional services work. I had to very, very early on set boundaries and make it very clear that, you were prepared to walk away from a client, that you wouldn't take client work on at any cost just because it was fees. And over the years, yeah, very much so. I'm involved in lots and lots of women groups. I mentor young women. I mean, there's definitely because there are more opportunities for women now, for sure. But I do think we're more supported. I think if a woman needs a female mentor, for example, you can go and find a very good female mentor quite easily now. And corporates have to be, as we know, I mean, in terms of diversity and inclusion, organizations have got values and they've got standards that they have got to adhere to now. So there's loads more transparency, and there's a lot less bad behavior. The type of stuff I saw would have made people's toes curl.
Yeah. So I worked 15 years in Big Four professional services. So even over those 15 years, the advent of when I started, where 95% of partners were men, to when I left, it was 60-40 or 55-45. The women were getting to senior positions. But the one thing I wanted to say was there is difference in company culture, in that some companies are more progressive than others, and particularly companies that style themselves on sort of bank style transactions, because banking is still quite male orientated and quite not very progressive. How have you implemented culture into your own business? Not just for women, but for ethnic minorities, for social mobility. How have you tried to embed that culture within your company?
Well, I think the in terms of culture, I mean, I set out wanting to make sure that my business had integrity, and that I learned that some of the lessons of the things that I'd seen around me and the behaviours that didn't sit well with me. So that was really important. And so we've always had a very open working relationship with everybody that's come through the business, and I'm very proud to say that after 25 years of having the business, there's an alumni of people who've worked for Roland Dransfield who've got their own, we've got friendship networks. There's a great big club of people who have been amazing leavers, and we're friends now. But we did, one thing it is, we have had this conversation recently actually in the team, that it is difficult to sometimes recruit a team with that level of diversity in it. We're a small SME, and there is an issue in terms of the people who are coming into the industries. That's predominantly the problem that you have. So that if you're looking for somebody, say, with 10, 15 years experience, or even 10 years, 5 years experience, it's who's coming into the industry. So is the industry doing enough at that very early level to attract people from diverse backgrounds? We do a lot of work with charitable organisations, where we're trying to, one project that we're working on is called Our Year 2022, and that's about what we do as a business community to help make the next generation, or the young people today, understand that this city that we're in here, it is available. Those opportunities are available for many of those young people who just don't feel that those doors are open to them. So I think there is still an issue. I don't think we're there yet. But in terms of a culture point of view, we did a lot of work on our culture and our values about 3.5 years ago, because I felt that time we were going for quite fast growth. We'd brought some people into the business who had quite a lot of industry experience, and which they kind of got through different organisations, but the culture of the organisation changed. I felt we were being taken away from what was really important to me, and I felt depressed, and I felt upset about going into my own organisation, knowing that some of those values weren't how I wanted, and I wanted the business to show up. So we did a huge piece of work around what we wanted the culture to be, what those values looked like. And as a result of it, which is an inclusive exercise, we did lose some people out of the team because they, for whatever reason, felt they couldn't show up against those values. We lost some clients because we decided that those clients didn't fit in with the way that we wanted our values to be, and therefore I couldn't expect my team to have to work with those organisations that didn't share our values. So our brand, I suppose, has become our values now, and it is absolutely inclusive. We have one of our values is leaders create leaders, and that's about the fact that it doesn't matter if you've got 6 months experience and you're a Kickstarter, you've got 25 years experience, everyone's a leader, and we encourage people to take a lead and have a voice. And we have lots and lots of ways within the organisation where everyone's voices, and needs and requirements are heard by everybody in the team. So it's not hierarchical at all.
Amazing. It's so important in business to do that. So you mentioned about Manchester. Why is Manchester so dear to your heart?
Well, because it's the best city in the world, for a start. For me, I mean, I'm born and bred Mancunian, and so it's been massively supportive to me. It's given me my life. It's given me my friends. It's given me my business relationships. It's provided an income for my family, and it's created so many amazing experiences to be part of this city for that period of time. So I set my business, Roland Dransfield, I set the business at 1 month, after the IRA bomb decimated the centre of the city. And from that point, because of timing, I suppose, and my passion for the city, we ended up being involved in working with public and private sector to really rebuild the city, in actual fact. And then that piece of work that went around rebuilding and improving the central core, it then moved out. So we then were involved in helping to regenerate different neighbourhoods in the city, in the city, in the city centre, and that has had impacts in terms of international investments into the city. We've got retention of a massive student population here. We now retain so many more of our students than they don't all just get on the train to London. It's created, over the years, a cultural revolution. Manchester is synonymous with protest and activism and, fierce passion. So that's in the DNA of our street. So that's what excites me so much about this city. And we've just been, Time Out has just announced a few months ago that we're third leading city in the world behind Amsterdam and San Francisco. Wow. So I don't totally agree. I think there's a brown paper envelope in there somewhere, but I mean, incredible, third best city in the world, and that's because of all of those things. Yeah. So for me, I mean, we have got an office in London, we've got an office and a team in London, and we've got a partnership with an LA agency now, which we work very closely with them. But I think what we have in Manchester in terms of our personality and our drive and our ambition, our resilience, goes a long way in terms of the type of business values that I want us to have.
Amazing. I live in London, so I'm completely biased towards it. Manchester's a great city. I've been there a few times. It's fantastic. Where do businesses go wrong with communicating to their clients?
Well, again, in 25 years of the business, in the olden days of comms, and not that we ever did this, but you could be asked, and it was a common question. This has gone wrong. How do we cover that up? How can you make sure, and don't get me wrong, there are still, as we see in daily life, particularly say at government level, there are quite complex ways of keeping stuff out of the press or re-emphasizing other things. So there is an art to that. But what we've seen again with government is that there's utter transparency now. You can't hide things. You can't say that you're one thing and be another. I mean, is it Ben Horowitz's book is what you do is who you are. So your integrity and your ethics and your values as an organization is how you show up in life. And consumers are now very much more demanding of the ethics of organizations. So the way businesses go wrong in terms of communicating is if they do not lead with transparency, if they don't make the values very clear, if they don't follow through on what they say they do on the website. I mean, you can get pulled apart in seconds by not walking that talk. So what we say to our businesses, and again, we really work now with businesses, we ask them about their values before we agree to work with them, but think about what those are before you start to come up with a creative copy, or you start to you want a communications campaign around what you think other people think about you. That's not the case. You've got to go back to basics and really figure out how you are showing up in life as a business. And if you're not doing that, fix that before you start to want to put a communications strategy together.
So how important are values? You mentioned values just then for businesses. Like, as you say, they're sadly there's everything from I don't want you to comment on situations, but something that popped into my head when you were saying was that situation with BP when they had the oil spill in somewhere in America, sort of, and it was the CEO was brought to the front. He was the person communicating what they were doing, and it definitely felt like it was all hands to the pump and sort of try and make this into what it could not be made into a positive, but what lessons they could learn. How important are the values of the company from the message that they communicated on their website, on interviews, on newspapers, broadcasts, social media? How important are the base values to business?
I think they are the most important thing. I think they are the starting point to any organisation. I am staggered at the amount of businesses that we talk to, not necessarily work with, who I ask them about values and what are your values, and even the top senior management, they can't tell me what they are, or they've had some very expensive management consultants come in and produce those values with them, and then they're locked in a drawer somewhere, or they're on a file somewhere, and they aren't lived values. You couldn't ask somebody who was 6 months into the organization, you know, what does your business stand for, what's your company stand for, and then be able to tell you that. You ask anyone in our team, we've got 15 values. A lot of people, you know, there are lots of values, and people say, oh, you know, why do you need so many? But everybody knows them because we live them, and we check in on those values in what we do internally, what we do with our clients, the content that we put out there, the charities that we work with. So our values are our DNA. But what we saw massively, I think, in certainly at the early lockdown, when pandemic hit, you saw a lot of movements of staff from organisations who suddenly, when you take everybody out of the office, and you know the table tennis or you know the pinball machines that they've got in, or the softballs that they've got in reception, which gives them their kind of how we show up as an organisation. It's fun, it's cool. When they're all working from the kitchen table, if they don't really, if those people didn't really understand what the values were and how their teams helped them through those difficult and challenging times throughout the pandemic and lockdown, they'll lose sight of who they're working for. They might as well go and work for someone else because they don't know their organization's values. And we'd done this piece of work, and probably 18 months before the pandemic. And in our office at the time, we had one full wall that was we had beautiful wallpaper, and all the values were on there, and everyone knew them. And I remember sitting around somebody's laptop watching the decided to try and work at home the next day, and we put stuff in place. And we never went back into the office for 3 months after that. But as everyone went, and I stood in front of our wall in the office, I had no idea what was coming. And I looked at those values and I thought, we may not be coming back in on Thursday, and we might not be coming in for a very long time. And when we come back in, the business and the landscape may be very, very different, but the values will stay the same. And the values kept us together as a team. They kept us showing up for our clients. They kept us giving back into our community and doing free work for people, supporting people, you know, our organisations and charities who need it, because that's what we were as an organisation. Our business has grown like massively now from the pandemic because I think we were able to show up, whereas so many organisations lost sight of what they were about, what they stood for. And I'm not saying big brands. I think we've got some great examples from some of those big brands of how they did reach out and use their platforms to do good. And it's those businesses that are thriving now. And I don't think the businesses that didn't have those values clear, and they didn't communicate those values with their teams and their stakeholders, they are the ones that are struggling now, because I don't think they know what they are anymore. Things have changed so much.
Mm-hmm. How do you effectively embed values and a communication style from a client which might be 50 to 100 people versus a company, a larger corporation with 10,000 employees in London or in the UK? How do you approach them differently for the smaller companies, 50 people versus the 10,000, 20,000 people?
In terms of?
Well, I'm just interested more along the lines of larger corporations that struggle to be able to communicate their values. They might have them listed. They might even try and talk about them at sort of all hands meetings and sort of full team meetings. But sometimes the values cannot can't be communicated effectively with big corporates. What are the challenges, and how do you overcome those challenges when you're dealing with large corporates and their values and their messages that they're trying to get out to their employees?
Well, I think if the structure in the organization is right, and if people put values at the heart of what they do, so that every day that you walk through the front door of your organization, whether it's in San Francisco or Amsterdam or Manchester, the commitment to the commitment from the senior directors or the business owners is there. And that's DNA. It's impossible. It doesn't, if you've got an organization that's got 10,000 people in it, that organization should have the infrastructure with people. It should have the right structure then for external communications. So to me, it's irrelevant whether you've got 5 people or 5,000 people, that your checkpoint, your sense check and your benchmark should always be, for example, these are our 5 values. We've sense checked these. This is how we want to show up as an organization or a brand, or this is how we show up in life. Is every single part of the communications piece underpinning who we are? For me, I think that's down to operational the operational model, I suppose. But if the commitment and the dedication about values is there, then it doesn't matter how big your organization is, because it should start with that.
Absolutely. And I've worked in a few companies where they've got their values on the wall. No one cares about them. No one has any conscious awareness of them. They're just things that they have to sort of do e-learning with and sort of blurt out once a year, and they're not part of their business. And that's really disappointing. I say I've worked in a couple of companies like that. It's just bland. It's just, it's just not been embedded. It's what they feel as a process they need to have on their walls, but it's not embedded in their company. It's so important.
I think on that, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, if you don't live and breathe the values, if you don't make them part of what you do on a daily basis, then you're right, no one will give them a second thought. We have one of our values is no D apostrophe heads, asterisk. So, we say so. And that is actually from, we were massively inspired by the book Legacy by James Kerr, which is about the All Blacks.
Right. Yeah.
And so a number of our values are akin to theirs. Another one is walk a mile in another's shoes. So these are values that we show up around. One of them is sweep the sheds, which is no job's too small, and that's the All Blacks. After, no matter how well they perform on the field, they'll then come back, and after they've celebrated, it's their job to make sure they leave their changing room, their shed, in the same way it was when they went in, and that job is as important as winning that game. So, but we talk about these things. Our clients now talk about these things with us. We have the team might say, so for example, in the boardroom, you've had a meeting in there and you've got some of the senior team have left all the coffee cups in there. Our Kickstart, who's 6 months into the career, can go to us, oi, go on, sweep the sheds. It's not that young person's job to clean up our mess. We have got, so we can hold ourselves accountable. I can't have no D heads on the wall in 2-foot letters, and then have people walk past that and then me allow them to work for a client who is one. I can't do that. So it gives them protection, and it gives our clients the reassurance that we will honor those values and that we act with integrity. So I think it is so important.
It really is. So what's the plans for the business and lifestyle for the next 2 to 5 years?
So we're now on a big growth curve from Roland Dransfield. We're looking at recruiting some more people. We've also taken a look at the type of work that we want to do. So a lot of the work that we now want to do is around with organisations who've got real purpose, who do want to create that legacy piece. That's what lights our fire. So we're and we're also working with a lot of organisations around establishing their values. So if they have got values but they aren't walking and talking them, we're helping them to really communicate those. And for those organisations who haven't got them in place, we're actually helping them to develop those, and they're finding that, you know, massively changing. It's kind of life-changing for their organisations. We've also set up a new podcast business on the back of the podcast that we did, and we've won a number of awards for our We Built This City, which is about Manchester and all the amazing born bred Mancunians that have got lots of stories to tell. So we've now got a separate business which is really looking at clients' audio strategy. We're finding that's a really great way to make sure that you get into the ears of people who are massively engaged. So there's much less wastage than other forms of communication potentially. And I want to write a book which is around values. So I'm just starting that at the moment, which is around how organisations need to show up around values and the impact that can have on their own and their businesses, but also on the lives of the people that work with them.
Oh, amazing. Well, good luck with all of that.
Thank you.
One last thing before we move on to the quickfire questions. Does that mean more offices in England, in the UK?
I think no. I think also with the way that we can all work now, I think we're kind of committed to Manchester and London, and we have got the agency which is in LA and New York. So I think we'll probably be, that's where we will stay for now. And you know what we all have also done is, although we do some hybrid working, everyone wants to be around each other and together. So we'll be expanding offices, I think, in terms of Manchester, and keeping quite flexible in London.
Amazing. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the interview. I asked the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They're quickfire questions. They don't need a quickfire answer. First one is, what was the best decision that you made?
The best decision I made was to start my own business.
Why was that?
Because it gave me the freedom to learn from my own mistakes without somebody trying to judge me on those mistakes, and it gave me the opportunity to show up in life and business the way I wanted to. I think I became quickly unemployable. It's given me freedom to be able to bring 2 fantastic kids up as a single parent as well. I've met some of the most amazing people, and it means also that, you know, I can get up every day, and if I've got an idea that I really believe in, you know, it's within my my gift, I suppose, to be able to go and experiment and see if that will work without somebody telling me that it won't.
Amazing. What's the best advice you've been given?
The best advice I've been given is to be nice and courteous and respectful of juniors. So that came from a very established journalist when I was literally starting out in my career, to say that, not that, you know, that this wouldn't be my nature anyway, but there was a tendency for people to be dismissive of junior people in organisations, or particularly in the media. And the point being that junior is one day going to be the editor. And if you don't treat them with respect when they're learning their craft, they will remember you when you want to get that big story in on the front page. And I think that analogy works for life in general. It's, you know, it's be respectful and be kind, and give people a hand up, because we've had enough, you know, hand ups from other people as we've gone through our career.
Amazing. Who helped you most in your career?
I think I would have to say Roland Dransfield, although he did pass away before I actually set the business up in his name. I think without his influence and his belief in me, and without that bucket and that sponge that he brought around to my mum's house that day, I'm not sure. Well, I certainly wouldn't have the journey I've had with Roland Dransfield without him. So for me, he's the person that set me on my entrepreneurial journey.
It sounds a bit like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm not saying your dad was a poor dad, but you know,
no,
what I mean?
My dad did. My dad, well, you know, Roland changed my family's life in a way, because he saw Dad and he gave Dad that opportunity, and he and Dad worked together for a very long time. So again, you know, I think our whole family's indebted to Roland, seeing that ability in my dad when he was a younger man.
Amazing. Do you have any regrets?
I don't know. I don't think I do have any regrets, other than one of the things I have learned, and it's taken me some time to really understand that, and having set values was actually one thing that helped me to do this, was um, be confident in your own boundaries. Um, it's very easy when I think it relates to the imposter syndrome that perhaps we all have at times, and self-belief, that if you don't know what your values are, how do you know if they're being undermined? And that comes with setting boundaries and being okay with it. Doesn't necessarily matter if other people get your values or have the same values, as long as they're really clear on what yours are and that you stick to them and there's no negotiation around them.
Right.
Because I would say that I've had in my career, when I've, showing up at work every day and being a leader, and then having to, look after, bring young children up, there's a lot of pressures on, and you have to show up as different people at different times. And I think at those times when you're feeling vulnerable and you're not feeling as strong, perhaps in one area of your life, if you can have those boundaries, it just means that you won't necessarily be taken advantage of as much as you can be when you've got your eye off certain balls, I think.
What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of my kids. I had to make sacrifices around my children to some degree when they were young. I mean, for example, the day I gave birth to my daughter, she's 21 in a week, I got told on that day that somebody who had promoted to run the business for me for 3 months, so I could have maternity leave, which I didn't have with my son. She'd resigned and was already ripping clients out of the business. So I didn't have any maternity leave again, although I did get that in lockdown this year. We were laughing last year because we had it after 21 years. But I have had to make sacrifices around the children, but I've also had freedoms with them, and I hope that my work ethic has been noticed by them. But they inspire me every day. I'm so proud of them, and what I've done is I've done for them, really. They're the ones that have got me out of bed every morning, and when I've not felt like it necessarily.
And I'm not trying to pry. I'm just trying to sort of showcase what you actually did. So with no maternity leave, did you get a nanny who looked after them? How did you juggle that with having no maternity leave at all?
So with my son, my son there's kind of 22 months between them. My son's nearly 23, and with him I did have 6 weeks off, and then I had a Friday off, and I had to have a nanny at the time, who was amazing. And then with my daughter, I literally had to go back into work 2 weeks later. So I had to, without going into the details of feeding a baby, I had to juggle all of that, and I had a nanny who looked after the kids when I wasn't there. But the guilt that comes with that is horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. But then there've been times in my life where I've been able to, I'd take them to school every single day, unless there was an exception. I picked them up usually 2 days a week. The dad, to be fair, was a great dad, even though we weren't together, and we shared a lot of that between us. So there've been some losses and some wins. I think overall, I've been able to go traveling with the kids. I've been able to take some time off. So I'll never get over the guilt of not being able to do that mum thing early on. But then, I had to make sure that I created the right future for them, and I hope I've done that.
I'm sure you have. What does legacy mean to you?
Oh, legacy is very important to me, and I feel that in life anyway, I think, whether you're a business or you're an individual, we're not here. We shouldn't be on this planet to use up all the resources around us. It's about creating more resource. And, we all know plenty of people who, I can't get my head around, there's people who are extremely wealthy and have amassed so much wealth that they don't seem to see that that's a platform for them to do more good. So, our business is so much about legacy. We do a huge amount of pro bono work. everybody in the organisation has free voluntary days, paid voluntary days off work. We raise a lot of money for charity, and the podcast that we have, We Built the City, is about celebrating the legacy that people are leaving. So our value, which is plant trees you'll never see, which is about leaving a legacy out of respect for those who follow. That's what drives me every day. And when you can put two people together or two organisations together, and they can create in that connection something incredible, that's the magic. That's what I want to do every day. So legacy is vitally important, and I think we all need to be aware of our respect for the planet or our society or our fellow humans, that we need to think about how we contribute to what we leave behind us.
Yeah, that whole point of planting trees for other people to benefit from is a great saying, and I think that's fantastic. And lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn, Lisa Morton. You can find us at rdpr.co.uk. On Twitter, it's at rdpr tweets, and on Instagram, it's at Roland Dransfield. And if you can find our podcast on We Built the City, wherever you get your podcasts. So yeah, that's where we are.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Lisa. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. It's been really enjoyable. Thanks, Mark.
Cheers.